already pointed to that. Jordan River.
Jordan River's right.
Judea, Hill Country.
Okay, no, this one was hard. Judea, let's see.
Well done, well done. Wilderness.
The Judean River.
Yep. The Mount Carmel.
Carmel is up.
Nice. Mount Hermon.
That is up
Off
here.
the map. Nazareth.
Nazareth is
Below
way
Jerusalem.
up. Yep. Yeah, here it's 35, I think.
Warmer, 33?
33.
Yep,
Oh,
33.
sorry.
Not bad. Samaria. Hill Country. Samaria, Hill Country. Yep. And Sea of Galilee.
The Sea of Galilee is there.
Okay. Well done. You get a prize.
Oh, I do?
So you get to choose between two prizes.
All right.
So
The crescent roll's great, that's my prize.
we don't want anyone here.
Let me guess, Mount Caramel.
Can you peek in there and see your two choices?
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really.
If I take the one, we can split it.
Okay.
Hit the golf balls.
I can share this with all of you later.
Now that box does say Easter.
Yes.
So it tells you a little bit. It came out of our pantry. Both prizes tonight came from the Myers household. So, all right. Well, welcome everyone. Well done, Nancy. That's great. Could someone grab the door, shut that door so we don't have any more noise coming through? Okay. So a lot of you were not here on the first night, and we showed a video where the speaker, Dr. John Beck, said that we want to grow our geographical literacy. And two ways, among others, he mentioned were, number one, to begin to read. You could read the Bible chronologically. You could also read it systematically according to subject, but he encouraged us to read the Bible geographically. And he gave a couple of powerful examples. One was in the village of Nain, which is here in Mount Moreh. There's Elisha the prophet raised a widow's son, and gave the son back to her. And then just on the other side of that hill in Nain, I forget the exact names of these, Jesus came, and he raised a widow's son and gave him back to her mother. And the people of the town said, surely a prophet has come to us. And these two events were separated by a large amount of time, but they were done in the same place so that it clicked with them, and they understood a lot more about what was going on. But if we just read through the Bible chronologically, we might not make that connection, and we miss the powerful nature of that. Another example is Shechem, which is in here, I believe somewhere in here. Or maybe it's right here actually, number 40?
Yeah, 40.
Yeah, okay. Shechem was very important in the Old Testament times when Abraham was shown that God would save the world through him, that he would give him the land. And then, who was it? It was Joshua assembled the Israelites a couple different times, one early and one late, and reminded them of the promise. And then Jesus, when he came along, came to Shechem and met a woman at the well. And she said, I know that the Messiah will come. And he said, I, the one speaking to you, am he. They happen far apart in history, but they happen at the same place. And if we read our Bible geographically, that will help us make connections. And then the other suggestion John Beck gave was to build a mental map, and which is what we're doing in this class. And he says a mental map is, you build a mental map by repeated trips to familiar places. So we can map in our minds how to get to Giant, because we've been there many times, we're familiar with it, and so we can think of how to get there. So we want to be building a mental map by poring over these maps and studying and learning. And then when we read our Bibles, we won't just skip over the names because we will know where they are. So tonight we want to do more of that, and we talked about the why it's important to study biblical geography. We talked about the context of the Middle East. Tonight we want to get into the features of the Bible land. So let me show a video, and we'll go from there. This is a video from the Satellite Bible Atlas, which has been tremendous for me. I've really enjoyed it. So this is about a 10-minute video, and then we'll review the video when we're done.
The basic geography and regions of the land of Israel. We noted in the previous video that the land of Israel is relatively small. It is about the same size as the state of New Jersey, the 5th smallest state in the United States. On map 1.1 in the Satellite Bible Atlas, note that the heartland of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, is only 150 miles long. From Jaffa on the Mediterranean coast to the Jordan River is only 45 miles. However, in this small land, there's great geographical variety. One region varies significantly from another, even though the regions are only a few miles apart. Map 12.3, the last map in the Satellite Bible Atlas, shows the various regions of the land outlined schematically. Each shape or outline shows a different region. Look how even the area of Judea in the south breaks down into 7 very distinct regions. The coastal plain, the Shvelah or foothills, the hill country, the Judean wilderness, the Dead Sea, the Negev or dry basin, and the wilderness highlands. This regional diversity has its effect on both biblical and modern history. The land's history has tended to be characterized by different ethnic groups who maintain independent political rule in different geographical regions. Peace and unity between all groups is seldom, if ever, realized. Here we are taught that real peace is obtained only when God rules men's hearts. As an historical example of the geographical and ethnic diversity in the land, note map 4.2, which shows the area that Israel was and was not able to conquer and settle in the days of Joshua and then afterwards in the time of the Judges. Israel was able to settle in large sections of Transjordan here, and all the way up into Bashan, and also in the hill country, parts of the hill country in Galilee. But Israel was not able to settle in the coastal plain, or in the Jezreel Valley, or north of the Sea of Galilee. Let's see some of the regional and geographical variety in this small land.
Well, here we are in the land of Israel, and in fact, contrary to common belief, most of it is not a desert.
We're in the hill country of Judah, which you can see is very forested, and we're near the biblical site of Kiryat Yarim.
Which means village of the forest.
The variety in Israel includes everything from lush green and waterfalls near Mount Hermon, the well-watered districts around the Sea of Galilee, agriculturally rich plains like the Jezreel Valley, the rugged hill country of Judah near Jerusalem. This hilltop is the ancient town of Kiryat Yarim, just mentioned by the gal in the video. The Ark of the Covenant stayed here for 20 years before Samuel led a national repentance. Later, David brought the Ark from here into Jerusalem. Here's the modern road leading into Jerusalem. And yes, deserts, like the rocky terrain of the Judean wilderness between Jerusalem and Jericho. On map 115, let's mark out the 4 major longitudinal zones, or zones that basically run north-south, that make up the land of the Bible. These zones subdivide into smaller regions, as we will see later, but a basic understanding of the regions of the land of the Bible starts with these 4 zones. First is the coastal plain, a strip of agriculturally productive land, some 8 to 12 miles wide, that runs parallel to the Mediterranean sea coast. This region tended to have an international aspect to it, since big empires, traveling between Mesopotamia and Egypt, wanted it. The Philistines settled here. Ancient Israel was seldom able to control it. Next is the hill country. Jerusalem, number 15 on this map, sits on the watershed of the hill country at some 2,400 to 2,800 feet above sea level. The hill country is rough terrain of deep valleys and high ridges. It extends north and includes Mount Carmel, which juts out into the Mediterranean Sea, and Galilee. Note here a break in the hill country, which separates the hill country of Judah and Ephraim from Galilee in the north. The break is a wide plain, the triangular or arrowhead-shaped Jezreel Valley. The third north-south zone is the Rift Valley. This is part of the longest rift on the surface of the earth, the Great Syro-African Rift, that runs from Turkey to Kenya. Here, the Rift Valley is a 10-mile wide plain or trench, which separates the hill country here in the west from the high Transjordan Plateau in the east. Much of the Rift Valley in Israel is below sea level. The surface of the Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. The Jordan River descends another 650 feet to the lowest spot on the earth, the Dead Sea. The surface of the Dead Sea is 1,350 feet below sea level. The unique depth of the Rift Valley, especially around the Dead Sea, is one reason there's so much geographical variety in this area. The Dead Sea is only 15 miles from Jerusalem, but is a totally different geographical zone. The fourth major longitudinal zone is the Transjordan Plateau. It can reach over 3,000 feet in elevation and includes the areas around ancient Moab, a plateau, Gilead, and Bashan, all the way up to Mount Hermon. There they are, the four major longitudinal zones of the land of the Bible: coastal plain, the hill country, the Rift Valley, and the Transjordan Plateau. Another important feature of the geography of the land of the Bible is rainfall. Believe it or not, Jerusalem receives as much rainfall as London, between 22 to 24 inches each year. The difference is that Israel's rainfall comes in about 5 months, between November and March, with the wettest months being in January and February. So, when it rains, it can pour. Rainfall in Israel varies greatly from region to region. This is especially because the Rift Valley is in the rain shadow of the hill country. Note on this cross-section diagram how most of the rain falls on the western side of the hill country watershed. Jerusalem sits here on the watershed, but east of Jerusalem there is a severe drop in elevation into the Rift Valley. The clouds dissipate and less rain falls the further one descends toward the Dead Sea. As mentioned, Jerusalem can get 24 inches of rain a year, but only 15 miles away, Jericho in the Rift Valley, near the Dead Sea, gets only 4 inches of rain per year. This variance in rainfall from region to region contributes to great geographical variety in the land. Let's see a winter rainfall in the hill country of Judah near Jerusalem. Israel has no major river that grants a continuous supply of water. Rather, as Deuteronomy 11:11 says, it is a land dependent on God's yearly provision that drinks rain from heaven. To review, the heartland of the land of Israel is only 150 by 45 miles. Yet this small land contains great geographical variety. The geographical variety has put its stamp on the land's history. We learned about the four major longitudinal or north-south running zones of the land of the Bible: the coastal plain, the hill country, the Rift Valley, and the Transjordan Plateau. Finally, we noted that Jerusalem receives as much rainfall as London, some 24 inches a year. However, rain falls only in the winter months, so the land of the Bible experiences long, dry summers. Without the winter rains, life quickly ceases. The writers of Scripture make it clear that man is dependent upon God to send life-giving rain.
Did that blow your mind? Okay, so what I want to do with our time is sort of review the video, the different parts of the video, and Eric will take a little bit of that, a couple of those sections. And we just want to continue to repeat trips to this place and learn the features. So the first thing we want to go through is the size. Can anyone remember the approximate size? And this was your question, Larry, at the very first session. We're trying to get a sense of the mileage, right? So, do you know?
150 by 45.
150 by 45. And Eric, I think you said on the first session that that's to New York?
Yeah, it's roughly from here. The length of Pennsylvania is roughly that same size.
Okay.
Considering how close we are to New Jersey, it makes sense.
Okay. So that's the size. So the point of that is it's a very small land, but there's great variety in that small land. Another part of the video was the 4 longitudinal sections of the land. So can anyone remember those 4 or point them out? Maybe I'll point it out and you can tell me what they are. And anyone can blurt it out.
Coastal plain.
Coastal plain. And do you remember who settled here?
Philistines.
Philistines, right. So Gath, like where Goliath was like somewhere in here. Maybe that's 7. Is Gath on there? Nope. So Gath is in here somewhere, one of the Philistines, right? So coastal plain. Then the next is Judean hill country. And I especially like the rain picture when they showed the cross section and you start to go up. Extra credit for anyone who knows the name of the foothills here.
Judean.
It's in the Judean hill country, but there's a certain Hebrew-sounding name for that. Okay, we'll get back to that. All right, the next longitudinal zone, Rift Valley. It goes from where to where? In the north, it comes from Turkey, and it goes down to Kenya. Right. And the elevation of the Sea of Galilee is?
1350.
I remember 700 feet below sea level. And then the Jordan River continues to drop down to the Dead Sea, which is
1350.
That's 1350 below.
1350 below sea level. So, and that's the lowest place on Earth. And then the last longitudinal zone, Trans-Jordan Plateau. Yep. So Moab is down here, and I think Moab is one of our new ones. Yep, Moab. So who does the Old Testament associate with Moab?
Ruth.
Ruth was a Moabitess. Okay, so that's where they went to find food. All right, and then,
So just jumping to the modern world, Amman, Jordan is somewhere like right here. And from the highways that have been built, it takes less than 2 hours if you can use the real highways without being stopped at the border to get from Jerusalem to Amman, Jordan. Yeah, so it's right here versus Jerusalem here. And we joke about the Susquehanna River being such a barrier, but the Jordan River only has 2 major crossings between the Dead Sea and the Galilean Sea. And that's it in terms of highways that you can get from here to there today. And then right now the border between Israel and Lebanon is completely closed. So if you want to go north from Haifa, well, even if you want to go to Tyre, there's no other option other than to come down, cross at one of the places below the Sea of Galilee, then go up and around because of geographic and political realities that they cannot avoid. And then I think there's only one crossing below here to get across the Rift Valley. So the Rift Valley is not a trivial valley. It is a monumental barrier that separates all kinds of people.
Generally, how wide is the Jordan River in the Rift Valley?
Not very big. That's a good question. I'm not even sure it's that wide, because the river itself is at the bottom of the valley.
Right.
And the valley angles up pretty steeply, so it is probably seasonal.
Okay,
So
so
during the rainfall, it's
it's
gonna
not
be
a
a little
matter
higher.
of just crossing it easily because you've got steep hills on both sides.
And remember how we said that the children of Israel, when they entered the promised land, came up on this side of the Jordan and then crossed over? Well, there's probably some theological significance to that. You know, how did they leave Egypt? God separated the Red Sea, and so this was the entering the new land. And so, do you remember what God did for the people of Israel as they crossed the Jordan? He didn't split the sea. He stopped the flow of the Jordan, and it piled up, and then allowed them to cross on dry land. Okay? And they went to Jericho. That's where they crossed. They went over to Jericho, conquered it. So I don't know if if it was that big a river that they had to have it stop, but I think there were some theological things going on there too. But that's what God did. So Gilead is over here, and then this is a new one for you. Nope, we're not going to do this one yet, but this is Bashan. Does anyone know where Bashan is mentioned in the Psalms? Psalm 22, the crucifixion psalm. My God, I hope I didn't check this, but I think it says, the bulls of Bashan have surrounded me. And it's almost a picture of the Roman soldiers surrounding and scourging Jesus. So this was a plateau area, and apparently bulls it was known for their bull production, I guess. So that's Bashan. So those are the four major longitudinal zones of the Promised Land. And then he went a little bit further, as just an example of the great variety. He took the region of Judah down here in the south, and he said there are actually 7 different categories. So we have the coastal plain. This is I don't know how to say it, Shvela? I think that's how he says it. Shvela. That's the Hebrew sounding name for the foothills in the Judean country. And this was important land because of this, the enemies controlling this, and Judah controlling this, so this was contested land in the middle. And it was probably strategic, being in the foothills. Then we have the Judah Hill Country, the Judean wilderness. Well, good job separating those two. So, but now, if you have that cross-section in mind, and the rain shadow, you might say, oh yeah, this is the hills, and then the rain stops as it goes down, okay? Then we have the Dead Sea, and then the Negev, which is actually where Abraham spent a lot of time. Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, they spent a lot of time down here. This was kind of like home base. And then the wilderness highlands. So just in that little 20-mile area, there's 7 different geographical locations. Okay, did you want to say any more, Eric, about the biblical and modern history, people groups, and such?
Well,
I mean,
no, yeah.
I brought this, I clipped it from the video,
Right.
and I think it's representative of just all the different regions and who control, not who, but that people control different regions. That's how they ruled, according to geographical region. Okay? But we would know this would be the Philistines, this is the Ammonites, I guess, the Samaritans, Jezreel Valley. He said this was not conquered. Let's go to that next one. So, and I think Larry on the first session also said, is Israel on the other side? And it's kind of all Israel, but when the tribes settled, some of the tribes settled on the other side of the Jordan. So in that sense, he was correct. So they were not able to settle the coastal plain or the Jezreel Valley or above the Sea of Galilee, the Hula Valley. Although God had given it to them, they did not possess the land. So And then those regional, like you were saying, Eric, those regional conflicts continue today, where you can't drive to Lebanon apparently, and you'd have to drive across here, and such like that. Okay, and Susan, oh, I guess we could zoom in here, or zoom out to the Middle East as it currently exists. So there's Lebanon above, and Jordan we talked about as well. Susan, the first week, said she always pictured Israel as a desert. And so they had a video of these two young people. Let's see, yeah, these two guys. And do you remember where they said they were? What geographical regional zone they were in? The hill country, yeah. And they said it's deeply forested. So it's not desert. This would be around Jerusalem. It was Kiryat Jearim, which is where the ark stayed for 20 years. And let me see. This is the Aijalon Valley, and that road, the modern road, goes, there's Jerusalem. So my best guess is that it's around here, Kiryat Jearim. That's where that picture was taken of the woods. And then we saw the rain. And did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so I wanted to read a little bit from, okay, so it's Psalm of Ascents. If you've studied the Psalms, there's a section of the Psalms right after the longest Psalm, 119, starts the Psalm of Ascents from Psalm 120 to 133, 34, somewhere in that. Anyway, and it's what the Israelites would have talked about among themselves as they went up to Jerusalem. So each year they were supposed to pilgrimage to Jerusalem 3 times. And so let me read a little bit from Psalm 124. If the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say, if the Lord had not been on our side, when people attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger flared against us, the flood would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept us over us. The raging waters would have swept us away. So right there in the Psalms is reference to the rainstorms that occur in this area. And you saw a picture of when it does rain, it's pretty intense and it's condensed into a short amount of time. And so when the rain first breaks, it can do things like flash flooding. And so there's an example from the Bible that helps you see the impacts of the weather, the impacts of the geography on the people themselves and how they thought of that and realized that it was good to be alive when the rains came and they survived. They knew that it was thanks to God that they were still with us and part of the meat still alive. Anyway, and then the other comparison is that 24 inches in this area is good enough to make this part of the world fertile enough because the rest of the climate is moderate. Pennsylvania has about over 40 inches of rain each year. And so, you know, as other farmers can tell us, that's kind of helpful and necessary to grow what we do because it's not quite as warm here as it is there. So that would be the balance.
Yeah, and I think if we do the next video on the roads and routes in Israel, if I'm not mistaken, they used the riverbed, the dry riverbeds when it wasn't raining as pathways, as routes, and they were called wadis, wadi. So, you know, you would walk it, but then if it rained, it was washed out. So that could have been something they were talking about. Flash flooding is a big deal, right? So that might show up in a video on routes and roads. And the other thing is, remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? The man went where to Jericho?
Down.
Down to Jericho. And tonight we can see that maybe a little bit better because he went from Jerusalem down the Judean wilderness road to Jericho. And that was quite a drop. So it quite literally makes sense. And then in the Psalm of Ascents, they say, let's go up to Jerusalem, up the hill country to Jerusalem.
Even when most of them were traveling south.
Right.
We call that up.
Right, yeah, okay. So hopefully we get to see the Bible in a little clearer focus as we learn about this. Okay, so we have, questions, Des?
I just looked and they said that Jordan River's about average 100 feet wide
Okay,
and 2 to 10 feet deep,
okay.
which, you know, I'm going to say maybe like Juniata River maybe,
Okay?
or it's nothing like the Susquehanna at all.
Yeah.
But 100 feet wide, you think, why not cross it
Right.
more places than 2?
Yeah.
How wide is the Susquehanna, you would guess?
A mile wide and a foot deep.
1,500 feet. Or-
Other questions on things we've gone over tonight? Yes, let's go with ladies first.
This is a question about what we didn't say. Where is Golgotha on that map?
Golgotha.
Where was Christ crucified?
Well, that would have been
Jerusalem.
in Jerusalem, or it would have been outside the city walls of Jerusalem, but you have to remember, so it would be right here at 19, somewhere right there.
But it would have been up in the hills?
Yeah, in the hill country.
Okay.
Yep, right outside. And Jerusalem has taken many shapes over the years. It would have been outside the city wall, which now would be inside the city wall because the city has grown,
Okay.
if that makes sense. And again, there's debate about where that was.
And then Bethany was within 2 miles of Jerusalem. And that would have been the home of Mary and Lazarus and Martha.
Oh, okay.
So that's only 2 miles away.
Right.
And then the other big one to me is the road to Emmaus. And so Emmaus, I think they said is probably 3.5 miles away from Jerusalem. So also very, very close. Yeah, there's, again, different theories because they're still looking for details of where exactly that might have been. And so the one article mentioned that it would have been a 7-mile hike there and back. roughly.
Okay.
So that's how they can do it in a day.
Which they were more adept at than we are.
We're driving to get to the right door, so we can, that's right, walk in here.
Larry.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment about some of the perspective that you're giving us. Because we're looking at 2,000 years of history right there, and there's still tribal fighting between all the people. And we most currently heard about Afghanistan and how it is so divided by tribal entities. It's just amazing that man can't get along better than it does.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
You're highlighting it. I
Yeah.
mean, it really,
Yeah.
what Eric said about not being able to travel from point A to point B without going around Robin Hood's barn is significant.
Right. Yeah. We have all these resources. The video you saw tonight, you can go home on YouTube and watch again. And the other 16 in the series, okay? One of them is a modern day drive from Jaffa, or Haifa, a modern day road excavation project, because they're widening the highway into Jerusalem. I loved it. I saw some kids playing soccer on a field off to the left. And I went to Google Earth. I probably spent too much time on this. I went to Google Earth and I zoomed in on a house and I prayed for that house. Amazing. So anyway, we have all these resources. Another resource I can show you is, and I won't spend too much time on it, but this is a walking tour in 4K during COVID, so it's empty. That's how we would all like to be able to tour Jerusalem, right? So, and he gives perspective on what you're talking about.
We're right before the fast of Tisha B'Av and Eid al-Adha, which are 2 big days in the old city of Jerusalem. And we're going to
So he's very knowledgeable. So you get all these resources.
What the situation looks like. Math's on.
So he talks about the tribal warfare and
So you can see there's just a few local Israeli tours, usually workplace related, but any of you who have been here or maybe you've seen some videos will know that where I'm standing, which is right next to the Jaffa Gate, you can not stick a needle on a day like this on a regular typical year. So we can see here the
even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is where it's believed Jesus was crucified, buried. Very. There are different chapels, different denominations that hold their own services. It's quite remarkable. He's going to take us inside
In
there.
many of the Christian streams, this is what symbolizes the center of the world. Just usually, I'm just standing outside. Talking about, can't even stand outside here. There usually is a line. In recent months before COVID-19 started, if you come here, so any of you been on the Israel Collective trips, just to see all these barricades would actually...
You can't get over the COVID.
Short, so I don't want to be disrespectful. Just kind of a little sneak peek, like you can typically not look in here. טוב. אבל בסדר גם. מציינים לחבר'ה מחו"ל שיראו איך נראית העיר העתיקה בתקופה. מציינים לחבר'ה מחו"ל שיראו איך נראה פה בתקופה הזאת. זה המטרה. אמן. Just talking to a friend here, he's in charge of this holy site. Says, God willing, next year it's going to be packed again. Guys, this is the old Of course, this is how originally it was built. The Byzantine period, then we come into the Crusaders again. It was recently renovated. Had to take collaboration by both the Kingdom of Jordan and Israel to help out with all the different Christian denominations here. As I'm standing here, usually the line starts all the way to the door, goes around the Rotunda, and then here is now sealed off.
You can watch that tonight. But did you hear the Kingdom of Jordan, and I forget what else he said, had to work together to get this renovated, and with all of the Christian denominations, and then he'll serve this chapel and that chapel. I was privileged to go to Israel in 1999, and I remember seeing that very same thing in this church. There was an Orthodox group that was swinging their incense box, and my sister was there, and it came right up to her, and she was like... But it's just interesting how they have to share the space, I guess, and we have so many resources. So we can share these videos with you, but I'd like to do a little bit... I'd like to show your next 15 things to know. Okay, so you have it there, but Beersheba is down here in the Negev. And this is where the patriarchs would have hung out. Isaac was in Hebron, down there, I guess. But this is Abraham's land, okay? Coastal plain, what? Did we not do that yet? I guess not.
No.
This is coastal, you guys got that, right? Coastal plain. Gilead, over here, we talked about that, Gilead. That's where the Ishmaelite traders were coming through and picked up Joseph, okay, at Shechem, or no, Dothan up here. Okay, they were coming from Gilead, picked up Joseph at Dothan, and then went down to Egypt. What's next? Hebron, that's where Jacob sent Joseph from. Is that 14? Yep. So this is what we showed on the first night. We read the story and we're like, oh, Jacob sent Joseph to Shechem. Okay. But if you realize, that's up to here. And then the people told him, oh, we saw them. They aren't here anymore. They went to Dothan, which is up here. So that's how far Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers. It's amazing. Okay. Hebron. Jaffa. That's out here. Haifa. So it's Jaffa, Haifa. They're all synonymous. Okay, that city there. Jericho. Went down to Jericho, from Jerusalem down to Jericho. Jezreel Valley. This is the arrowhead-shaped valley. And there's another view which I don't have here, but this pass between the mountains is strategic, and Megiddo, the town of Megiddo, guards that pass. And Megiddo in Revelation is called Armageddon. So this is where the battle would take place in the mind of the vision there, in that flat, fertile valley. Okay, what's next? Jordan Rift Valley from Turkey to Kenya. You got that? You guys got this so easy. Next week it will get harder. Megiddo, we just talked about that. Moab, down here, Ruth. Mount Nebo. Does anyone know what Mount Nebo is about? What significance does Mount Nebo have? This is where Moses, last stop. The last stop for Moses. That's God. He got to look over the promised land, and God buried him. Mount Nebo. Negev, down here. Shechem, right there. That's like sort of the capital of Samaria. Okay, not the capital. It's a prominent city in Samaria. All right. Shephelah is the foothills. So this is where Samson happened, in the Sorek Valley, these stories. And he took the gates of Gaza towards a hill in Hebron. So it didn't go the whole way to Hebron, but there's debate on that. But he carried the gates pretty far. Okay? So Samson was here, fighting against the Philistines. This is the valley of Aijalon, Sorek, and Elah. So this is where David and Goliath happened. And I was showing that because that all happened in the Shephelah. And then the last one is Tyre, which was mentioned in Lebanon, I guess, right? Tyre. Do you know why Tyre is mentioned? Jesus mentions Tyre. Tyre and Sidon. He's judging the cities, or Capernaum and these cities here, and saying that if the miracles that happened here happened in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented, but you didn't repent. That's Tyre. Phoenician. All right, so you can work on that till next week. Does anyone, let's see, we need another prize winner. Who came up with a great answer? You came up with a great observation, right? Yeah, you got the roll. This won't add anything to your waistline. You want to receive tonight's prize? Or should we? Who else deserves a prize? Anyone? Well, you went beyond the Call of Duty and hooked up the width of the Jordan, so you are awarded. You're awarded. This also came from my house. Okay? All right. Any other final questions before we get out of here? Would someone like to lead us in prayer as we go? Oh, thanks.
Father, we just thank you for this time to come and learn together about the geography of what is going on in Bible times. And we ask you, Lord, that you open our minds up to the significances we shared tonight, Lord, and the significance of how it just makes all the more real that you walk on this earth and how the earth was designed and just all the beauty of it, Lord, the beauty of your love for us shown throughout your creation. Now we ask you to bless our time as we go from here, Lord, and just bless us as we study the maps, and Lord, just bring us back next week to learn more about you and more about your love for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.